anything that's happening with Mars in the sky is, again, where all the activity, all the action is. So Mars is where we're facing the current battlefield of our life. It's the playing field. So this is the content arising where we're going to be making choices. It's the next step. We're called to go here and respond and move in a certain way. And this is shaping, it's paving the road for our soul journey. And when we interface Mars with Pluto, we have to remember that Pluto will really stir everything up. Pluto brings what's meant to come, and it takes what's meant to go. There's a beautiful quote from Ramana Maharshi that I often speak of when I talk about Pluto, which is simply, allow what comes to come and what goes to go, and see what remains. That's a powerful teaching. And it's a teaching, actually, I want to dissect this a little bit because this is so helpful when we start looking at Mars, which relates to conscious choice. So often on our soul journey, we get hooked around the idea of choice, where we perceive our choices either from the perspective of, I need to do something to achieve, get, accomplish, maintain, obtain that which I otherwise need and won't get. Or I need to do something to repel or be rid of that which is here that I do not want and must not have. So our actions are oftentimes derived from a place of seeking what we believe we need or trying to resist what we believe we don't need. And so when we think of the idea of allow what comes to come and what goes to go and see what remains, for me, when I meditate on that, it actually takes me right to the core of my own choosing, my own choice, my own conscious orientation in life. Because otherwise, if I'm shopping for avocados, if I just allow it to come, I'm not going to get any avocado. If I just, sit here and I'm like, avocados, I'm going to let it come if it's meant to come. If it doesn't come, it's not meant to come. So obviously, it's not what he's talking about. I feel we have to reshape and redefine how we think of choice. If we're not orienting from a place of concern with gain or loss, trying to control or manipulate outcome, the other way of experiencing choice is one where we're responding to an inner noticing. This is a simple thing, but it's actually really profound, I find. We're responding to an inner noticing. We're feeling and sensing that there is a calling for something. We're not choosing it, right? Like, I'm noticing I want avocados. Like, you're not wanting avocados, you're noticing that the wanting is there. Do you see the difference? It's simple, but it's really deep. I'm noticing that I feel a certain way, as opposed to I'm choosing to feel a certain way, or I want to do something. It's like before that, there's a noticing that wanting is there. And where does that wanting come from? Where does any desire come from? Any impulse? It doesn't come from our self-concept. It just arises on its own, like everything else in life arises on its own. Because we're so hooked on identity and possessiveness and taking credit for things, it's this whole identity construct that wants to attach personal identity. It wants to create a sense of self out of its experiences. We then tend to identify with an impulse that's completely impersonal. And so the choice to go and get avocados, it first and foremost derives from the experience, which is spontaneous, of noticing there's a want, there's an interest, there's an orientation towards avocados. And then, the ego executes it. We make the plans and we go out. But to contrast this with the other, you're in the store and you see avocados and you think, oh, I need to get avocados because fill in the blank. Some kind of rationale coming from fear. Like there might be a power outage, and if I don't buy any avocados now, if there's a power outage and I can't go to the store because the store is closed, and then I might want avocados, then I won't have any if I don't buy them now. Of course, the power outage would have to be in the next 2 days, because after those 2 days, the avocados will be overripe. So what's happening in that instance is, there's an impulse that arises. That impulse is one of fear, nervousness. That's also spontaneous, right? There's a sensation that's spontaneous. You're not creating that. That's just there. But then immediately, consciousness identifies with it as a problem. Here's something, I need to fix it. So I'm going to strategize my life and make plans accordingly. But it's coming from a concern with what I might lose or what I feel I otherwise need to gain. But if I had this experience of noticing, oh, avocados are wanted, and I go to the store and there aren't any avocados, that's fine, because I wasn't attached to the idea of getting avocados. I was just following this natural flow of life to experience the next thing. And if I notice there's still an interest, I can perhaps choose to go to another store and get it. Or maybe my desire for that will be gone. Maybe that impulse for avocados isn't there anymore. We can't fake it. We can't make up our impulse. We can't make up our desires. So in a way, there's a way of living where what we're choosing, what we're planning, how we're orienting isn't coming from this concern and this need to control life circumstances out of fear of what we might lose or what we might not get. It can rather come from an existing present moment experience of noticing what's wanted. And in that sense, our choices aren't really ours as much as we're like cooperating with what life is wanting to do. It's a very beautiful way of looking at choice. And so to come back to this teaching, allow what comes to come and what goes to go, and see what remains. When we're not attaching to outcome, that's possible. When our actions are deriving from an authentic and spontaneous and sincere noticing of what wants to happen, then there's no possessiveness there. There's no identity linked to it. So we can be free in our actions. We can be clear in our conscious as well. And then what happens next is literally the revelation of life revealing itself. We can have that experience of directly experiencing life in its flow, in its rhythm, and we can find that we're a part of that rhythm because it's happening inside. We're noticing what life is doing. And so we respond, we make choices, we orient our life direction. And that's where we say, oh no, I'm going to say no to this, I'm going to say yes to that. But there doesn't need to be an underlying possessiveness in it. The moment the possessiveness comes in, we're saying to life, I need things to be this way. For my wholeness, for my security, for my well-being, it must be this way. Which doesn't mean, again, let go of taking care of yourself or let go of security. It means letting go of possessing it. It's such an important distinction. And so we allow what comes to come and what goes to go. We trust life. We watch what happens. Now, when we have Pluto and Mars squaring each other, and I'll get in a moment to the nature of this particular square, but it's a juncture where there's a lot of sensation, a lot of things to notice, and we're called to move in certain directions. We're called to initiate different activities. In this case, relationships are a big part of it. And as we do that, we're going to receive feedback from the environment, and that feedback will interact with our field. And if there's any karmic tendency of identifying our power in controlling outcome and circumstance that will arise for us. And that's where this can become that self-cleaning oven purification process. Really coming to know, if I'm not concerning with outcome, what kind of choice would I make right now? If my security doesn't derive from making sure things happen a certain way, what would I then do? How would I look upon this situation? And that's where we can really claim that empowerment within Pluto and that non-victimhood. That's true sovereignty, because what actually happens here is the whole world becomes available to us. Reality as it actually is becomes available to us. We can't live in reality when we're orienting from personal concern and attachment with outcome. We're living in a self-created construct of agenda and effort to make things the way we believe they need to be. But when we're not concerned with outcome and our choices orient from that noticing of what wants to happen, we can actually respect and revere and trust and appreciate and be awed by life and how it responds and dances and moves with us. So we actually experience the flow of the cosmos. We actually witness what wants to happen, which again is just a completely new and very freeing way of orienting to life. And I want to say one more thing just to really emphasize this. I feel that most of us humans, tend to go to these extremes of, okay, well, if I'm not going to be controlling it, I'm just going to let go and trust. But that's kind of like not getting the avocado, right? It's like the flow of life, the Tao, the way of life isn't about activity or non-activity. It's not about action or inaction. It's about this present moment.